I feel alive.
Welcome to the ADVMoto Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Slabaugh, and this is episode 3. In each episode, if you're new to the podcast, we choose a theme for the episode, and this episode's theme is getting sidetracked. So if you've ridden a week, a month, years, you've gotten sidetracked, and something has happened that has caused you to deviate off your course or what you expected the journey to be. And it's how we deal with getting sidetracked that kind of makes the adventure what it is. And on this episode, we have 2 amazing guests. You'll get to meet Jocelin Snow, and she is her riding story is incredible, and she's a racer turned trainer turned now an ADV competitive ADV rider, most recently in the International GS Trophy that she's raced. So we talk a little bit about her career and how she got sidetracked and what she did about that. But up first is Mark Wallace, and so Mark Wallace is a photographer extraordinaire. And if you haven't heard of Mark Wallace, just Google his name. He's prolific in his photo training, but he's also been riding around the world full time since 2014. And so we talk a little bit about his journeys and times that he's gotten sidetracked and where he currently is, which is quarantine in Argentina, and how that's working out for him. So we're going to start with Mark. And just a heads up, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a video version as well on YouTube. So some of the stuff that we reference that he's going to show on screen is on the YouTube version. So if you're listening, just go with it, and if you want to see the visual part of it, just log on to YouTube and type in ADVMoto podcast, and you'll find it. So let's go. So I'm here with Mark Wallace from markonabike.com. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thanks so much for having me. It's sort of an honor to be here. I've been looking forward to this, and this is podcast number 3. What a privilege that I'm the guest for number 3. I can't believe it.
Yeah, no, we're stoked to have you on. I mean, for those of you who don't know Mark, you'll get to know him over the next little bit here, and he is a very prolific photographer, writer, blogger, amazing.
Social
stuff.
Media is in my blood. Maybe that's how you say it. Yeah.
Runs through the veins. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who have never met you, kind of, the theme on this episode is we mentioned is getting sidetracked. And, it's something that I think is organic in, every trip you take. There's going to be something that happens that you can't anticipate or can't plan. And it's kind of like, how do we deal with that, when it comes along? And you've done some, you've basically been traveling since, I believe, 2014. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's right. Full time. So I sold everything I had in 2014 and left. First, I did planes, trains, automobiles, took taxis, cars, bicycles, whatever. And then in 2016, I got my GS, and I've been riding ever since January 2016. Around the world. So I've done all the continents except for Antarctica at this point.
Wow. And to give people an idea of where you've been, you actually have a map. I think this will kind of illustrate his point.
Yeah. So here's the journey. So I began, in 2016 in Arizona, and I did my break-in ride. I went up to Seattle. I went to Touratech. I got a new suspension, some things fitted out up there, and then back down to Phoenix. So that was about a 3,000-mile ride just to break in the bike, make sure I knew what the heck I was doing, get the gear right, all that stuff. And for anybody that's doing a around-the-world trip, I highly recommend doing at least a 2-week test ride. Take what you're planning to take, try it out if you can. I know 2 weeks is quite a long time, but so then I made my way through Mexico, Central America, South America, through Africa, Europe, Russia, Siberia, down into Mongolia for just a tiny touch of a few days there. It's one of the places I got sidetracked pretty seriously. And then Southeast Asia, Australia, went back to Europe for a few months, back to the United States to do a little loop around the national parks, and then back down through South America, down to Tierra del Fuego. And then the plan was to ride up the eastern coast of Argentina and then see some of the places I'd missed the first time through South America, Posadas and spend some time in Salta and Mendoza, Iguazu, go up to Rio de Janeiro, go through Brazil, through the Amazon, and do some really cool things. But this little pandemic hit when I got to Buenos Aires, and little did I know that I would be stuck in the one of the world's most strict and longest quarantines. In fact, I think we're now the longest quarantine. We're still in quarantine. So we've been in quarantine since March 20th. And so it's, what's that, 5.5 months that we've been quarantined down. So it's, it's quite the diversion that's happened here. Yeah.
Well, talk a little bit about, I mean, pre-COVID, I like some of the times that you've gotten sidetracked, before COVID, what that's been like.
Well, I think that the first big sidetrack, I mean, there's being sidetracked for things you can't control, like the pandemic. And then there are being sidetracked for things that you have some control over. Like my motorcycle was stolen in London. I had some control over that. I should have had a better security system. And then there's being sidetracked for being an idiot. And that's what happened in Africa, because against all advice, I headed north from South Africa up through Botswana and into Tanzania during the rainy season. And everybody said, just don't do that. And so that was one of my very first hard lessons was, that I was going to go through the western side of Tanzania and up into Rwanda and then back over and sort of loop around Lake Victoria. And what happened was I got just stranded in this mud. And the thing is, I think if I had a writing partner, I probably could have made it through that journey. There's a video about it, by the way, on my YouTube channel. So it's, I think, Muddy Tanzania. You guys can put links or something, I guess. But so that became just difficult and more difficult, and then so difficult that I realized that just picking up the bike over and over and trying to make it through these really, really muddy, horrible roads, I was really going to hurt myself. Or worse, I was in places where there were lions and wildlife that could kill me. It just was not a good decision. And so I ended up having to turn around. And I got stuck in Mpanda, which is this little town in Tanzania. That was about a 10-day sidetrack. So I got stuck there. Luckily, it was really an amazing experience because I got to meet a lot of really neat people. There were a lot of people that helped me get out of that place. I talked to a lot of guys that, these are places where the maps aren't really super accurate, and what you think you're heading into might not actually match what's on paper. And so that was something that was really helpful. And, I want to show you, I've got this, see if I've got this picture. I can sort of show you the help I had, because it was really interesting. So I'll share this with you. So I met this guy in Malawi, who you guys might recognize. So Mark Stevenson. So if you've seen Long Way Round, this is the guy that helped Ewan and Charlie figure out that portion of the trip. And so I was able to meet with him. So he's aged a little bit here. And he actually showed me like where I should go and the routes I could take, and where the map wasn't matching where the actual roads were. And he actually said, you shouldn't do this. You should wait because you're at the wrong time of year. And I didn't listen to him. So that's a good example of just being sidetracked because of making a bad decision. But I still would have done it again, because it was an amazing adventure and a great experience. And I learned where my gaps were in my writing and skills and all kinds of things, and got to meet Mark. And so sometimes being sidetracked is not a horrible thing. I guess I would say that. Yeah. But yeah, and I think the other huge time that I got sidetracked was in London. I had my motorcycle parked at a hotel right in front of the front desk. There's a big glass wall underneath a security camera in a parking lot that had a gate. And I had my steering wheel lock on, but I had never used a disc brake or a chain or anything just because of the weight on the bike. I was trying to keep everything down. So I had no issue in Central America, South America, Africa, nowhere in the world. I get to London, and fortunately for me, when you ship a bike air cargo from one continent to another, you usually get a window of time. You're not really sure when the bike's going to show up. They'll say it's going to be there within 10 days. And what they're doing is they're looking to see which airplanes have space to throw your bike on to save money. And so different things get priority. So I had purchased insurance for my motorcycle in London for the day that I thought the motorcycle would arrive, but it had arrived 2 days or 3 days earlier than planned, which was cool. And, but I was in London and I had my bike at this hotel, and there's in the photography community, there was a little photography magazine that wanted me to come by and do an interview. And so I decided, like, okay, I'll stay an extra day. I'll do this. It'll be fun. The next day I woke up and walked out, no bike, gone. And so I called the police, and the police said, yeah, the way it works in London, and by the way, I didn't know this, but London is like one of the top places in the world for bike theft. I think it's number one, but I had no idea that was the case. I know now. So what happens is a lot of criminals in Eastern Europe, and what they do is they basically put in orders for motorcycles they want. They come over to London, and because of the way the laws are, it's easy to steal a motorcycle. And so these motorcycles are stolen, thrown on trucks. They go through the tunnel, and they're gone forever. So the cops said, you'll never see that bike again. It's gone. And because my insurance hadn't kicked in for a couple of days, I was like, well, it's gone. So what do I do? 3 days later, I got a call, and the police said, well, we found your motorcycle, but it's destroyed. So what had happened is I have a Touratech suspension, and it's made by Tractive. And when you go full manual on the GS, you have to have this little module that tells the computer that you have a suspension. And so it says Tractive on it. What the police said is they think that the thieves looked at that and thought it was a GPS tracker. And so they just threw the bike off the back of whatever truck they had it in, and it, went end over end. So the front stanchions, the windshield, the handlebars, the mirrors, the back wheel was cracked in half. The luggage racks were destroyed. The rear subframe was shifted over. It was substantial damage. And so it was about 10 weeks that I had to wait in London for BMW to repair and get all the parts and all that kind of stuff. And if you've ever been to London, it's just not cheap. I think it was like the cheapest hotel is maybe $120 a day, something like that, which is way beyond my normal budget. And so that derailment, that's being sidetracked there, cascaded into this over a year-long event. So what happened is the money that I'd planned on using to get into Russia and Siberia, I didn't have anymore. And so then I had to wait a few months. I had to sell some photography equipment. It was painful to sell that stuff, but I needed to. And then by the time I got into Russia, which is a difficult process to get all the visas and paperwork, it was August, which is really late to cross Siberia. So you don't want to be crossing Siberia in August and September, which is what I did. And so by the time I got to Mongolia, I'd planned to dip down into Mongolia and ride Ulaanbaatar and then back up into Russia. What happened is the rivers were rising because it was rainy season again. And so I started crossing these rivers, realizing that the rivers in front of me were rising and I wouldn't be able to cross them. So I would be stuck in Mongolia. And so I was on a mountain and I was using one of these guys. So if you're a solo rider, you've got to get an inReach. It's a lifesaver. So I was using that to text my brother who was in Kansas. He was looking at weather reports and maps and all kinds of things. And we spent about 6 hours going over the route and trying to figure out, was it possible to make it? And the answer, and I had also talked to many friends that had done this route before. And the consensus was you could probably do it, but you're putting yourself at pretty pretty high risk, especially at that level of riding experience I had off-road on gravel. And I was absolutely alone. And if you've ever seen or been to Mongolia, it's not like if you have an accident, somebody can come and grab you or even throw in a helicopter. I mean, you're in serious trouble if you get stuck there. So I decided to turn around and go back, which is one of the most devastating decisions I've made on the entire journey, because I really wanted to do that part of the trip. But that decision to turn around turned just that same day. I went to the same town I'd gone through, the first big river crossing I'd made. And the local townspeople were like, "Hey, how did you get across the river?" I'm like, "Oh, I rode across it yesterday or 2 days ago, I think it was." And they said, "That's just not possible. There's no way you could have done that." I'm like, "I did it." And they said, "Well, there's no way, because now it's very, very deep. So you'd have to have like a big 4-wheel drive or Unimog or something, a tractor."
Yeah.
And so one of my friends, Alicia Sornosa from Madrid, had done this route. And I remembered a story she told me where she had to find a local farmer with a tractor to get her across one of these river crossings because it was just too deep. And so I thought, I'm going to do that. So I found a group of guys, and they threw my bike in the back of this little trailer. And I've got pictures of this somewhere. But anyway, I made it out of Mongolia by the skin of my teeth. And I was really depressed about the whole thing. But the nice thing about it is when I got back to Russia, I met a bunch of people that I would have never met, and had this sort of a crazy experience with these college kids that were asking me to talk to them using English slang. And they would say, "We want you to say shifty drifty." I'm like, "I don't know what that is." "Say shifty drifty, like the Americans say, shifty drifty." And so that's my motorcycle's name, Shifty Drifty, because, shipped from Mongolia, and this whole experience, and these Russian kids that wanted to say Shifty Drifty. So getting sidetracked can be just a really amazing part of the experience if you have time. So a friend of mine who's also a world rider, Polo Arnaith, he says, "The plan is no plan." So if you have the time, and that's sort of the mindset to go into one of these really long trips, because it's not, if you're working in a job and you've got 2 weeks and you're going to go from Arizona to Yellowstone and back, you don't have that kind of freedom. You really have to plan things out and know how many miles per day you have and your mileage and budgets and all that kind of stuff. That is a radically different kind of trip and a worthy experience. And everybody should do that. If you can, do that. If you're doing a round the world trip, something that you're planning on taking a year or 2 or 6 months, something that's much longer, you have to be ready to have these things that happen that absolutely radically sidetrack your journey, and then not be frustrated with it, because it's not being sidetracked. It is the experience. That is the experience. So when you lay your bike down, or you get diverted, you get lost, something happens, that's why you go. That's what you're there for, is to learn, how are you going to react? How is your personality going to hold up against this challenge that you're facing? And so I know it's, what do you do when you're sidetracked? I say you rejoice in it, and you grab it, and you sort of take all you can from that experience, and you'll find out that it's the reason why you travel, is those unexpected things. That is why you travel. At least that's why I travel. I want to see the things that I have no idea I'm going to see. So it's wonderful. So
there's I think there's a point in experiencing that where you can like fight against it, or you can go with the flow, because I think I've had those times when it's just like you feel like everything's going wrong, and then you feel like things are imploding, and this isn't what I had imagined it would be, and and then you just kind of have to get to a point where you just kind of like go with the flow and say, well, this is what it is, and I can either get like really angry and frustrated and just self-implode, or like step back and kind of reframe what's my perspective on everything here, and it's hard to like kind of what you said, for when you have so much like money saved, or you're trying to budget, and figure out like what you can do, and then something like, I can't imagine like having my bike get stolen. That's like, that's a
It was
major setback,
heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, you have to go into it like it's a relationship. And there are times when you're on the journey and things are not happening the way that you expect them to happen, and it's emotionally, psychologically unhealthy, and that's a kind of a sidetrack that I've also experienced, and that's a different thing that you've got to take care of yourself and get out of that. And so specifically, when I was in Africa, I was taking some anti-malarial pills, and they have warnings. This can cause severe anxiety. It can cause depression. It can cause hallucinations, all kinds of really nasty things. And so when I got them, I posted on Facebook, this is years ago, that, hey, I've got this, I'm going through Africa. And there's a kind of pill you take every day, which is what I'd normally take, or one that you take once a week. And so because of space, things are so limited in space, I said, well, I'll just do the one a week pill. And people were like, don't take this drug, it's really nasty. I'm like, I've never had an issue with any drug ever. I think I'll be okay. And so I was taking these drugs, and I didn't realize at first what was happening to me. And then this is after being stuck in Tanzania and all of that. But I would sort of par for the course in parts of the world as being pulled over for nothing and having to bribe a cop to keep going. That's very common in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. And so after a while, it just sort of grates on your nerves. And so I would be pulled over for like going too fast through the middle of nowhere. And I'd be doing maybe 50 kilometers an hour. Like there's nothing. And so at one point I was just yelling at this police officer and just like, yeah, I've got a video of me somewhere. I filmed myself because I was thinking, this is not me, but I'm just like road rage. And then I was getting really crazy and depressed. I had a lot of anxiety. My dad he was really sick. He was fighting cancer. And so I was going through all this turmoil. And at the same time, I was in a place where nobody could speak English at all. So usually if I'm in a country, in most of the world, there's somebody that can speak English. But in parts of Africa, there are long segments where there's just, you have nobody to talk to at all. So it was just in my head. There was no internet, no Wi-Fi, just some texting through my inReach. So I was getting all of that depression and anxiety. And then one night I was in my tent and I woke up and there was a snake that had grabbed my arm. And so I'm swinging my arm around. There's this snake. I grab it, I throw it across the room, blood's coming out. And then I'm like, whoa, none of this is real. It's a hallucination. So none of that happened. It was just like those drugs. Wow. And I got to Kenya and I thought, I need to stop this because now it's unhealthy. I'm afraid for my own mental health. And so I did. So I flew into London and I stayed for a couple of weeks. That's when my motorcycle was stolen, actually, was after that. And the nice thing about the curse and the blessing is, so I was in this sort of mental state where I needed to let these drugs sort of get out of my body. It takes about 2 weeks. I was in London. My motorcycle is stolen. I have really good friends that live just south of London in Gatwick. And so I went to stay with them, and BMW said it's going to take a few weeks. So I got to hang out with these really good friends for a couple of weeks at their house and just sort of regain my emotional health and let all that stuff get out of my system. And so again, being sidetracked turned out to be this really amazing gift to help me recenter and refocus and then continue along the journey. And so it is a very frustrating thing, but looking back in hindsight, I don't wish my motorcycle had been stolen, but I'm glad I had that time to reset and go forward with the trip.
Yeah. I think, I think that comes, one of the things you're touching on, I think, is gratitude, that gratitude of, I think when we get to travel, travel humbles us. And because when we see and experience other cultures, we see the commonality of humanness around the world. But it also gives us a healthier perspective on, what we grew up with, what we consider normal, right, for our environment. And I think I think the ability to travel is at least for me, I'm always filled with gratitude that I have, this opportunity and this ability, and yeah, sometimes that helps when I'm in the
It
midst of a
does.
sidetrack, you're getting sidetracked of like, wait a minute, let's back up here. There's probably dozens of people that would love to be doing what I'm doing right now and be on this adventure. And
It does, and the travel specifically for me to be out of the United States for so many years at this point has helped me reframe what I understand as success. So, in our culture, success is fame or influence and power or money. Those are really the three things that we revolve around and think are successful. And it happens in the most informal ways. When you meet somebody new, the first thing you say is, what do you do? You're asking, like, how much money do you make? Basically, what are you, a doctor, a lawyer? You work, like, what's your job? That's how we identify ourselves as successful or not. And so, think of the people that we deem successful. They're politicians, they're actors or singers or wealthy people.
Yeah.
And in more rural parts of the world, that is absolutely not what is success. Success is having a large family, having a community that's very close, having time to enjoy with other people, having time to enjoy a meal together. Sobremesa is one of my favorite things I've learned. So it means on the table. It's when you come together with a group of people and you spend a day putting your conversation on the table, and you put your worries and your cares and your joys and all that, and you have this communal day. And in a lot of places, that is a normal thing that happens every single day. And now I'm like, that's success. I mean, could you imagine having that much time where you're able to have freedom from anxiety and the stress of a job and all of those kinds of things? And so it's just really sort of reshapes the thinking of we have houses, we have cars, we have technology, we have, right. And understanding that there are lots of people that have, but the things they have are just different, and they're no more less than what we have. And it's just how you frame and how you understand what success is and what happiness is. And so it's just travel is a wonderful, wonderful teacher.
Yeah. So kind of taking all that and bringing it into currently where you're sitting, which is Buenos Aires, I believe, in Argentina.
Yeah.
How does, like, how does your current, I don't know, like your current, I don't want to say situation, but I mean, you are kind of locked in Argentina, I guess, under the pandemic restrictions. How does this sidetrack compare to these past ones that we've talked about today?
Well, this one is psychologically, it's very difficult because there is no leaving. And so, I have significant friends in Europe that I would normally see in the United States. My bike is here. So normally, if, let's say, my bike broke down or was stolen or something, I could fly out, see other people, come back, and then continue. Here, I can fly out. I can return to the United States. So there are flights leaving Argentina every 2 weeks or so. So I can get on one of those flights, get to Miami, and from there, get back to Arizona. But I can't bring my motorcycle. So the motorcycle is stuck here. And if I do that, there is no guarantee that I can ever get it back. So leaving means the strong potential that Shifty Drifty, this companion that I've had for years around the world, gone forever. That's not an option for me at this point. Maybe if something happens in the future, I'll have to look at that. So that's one thing that's difficult. And then, I have a niece and her husband live about a mile from me here. So they just moved here the same time I arrived. That's why I came here originally, so I could spend time with them. So it's sort of nice to be able to just zip down the street. But because of the restrictions of the quarantine here, until just recently, until about 3 or 4 weeks ago, just to go and see them was something that was very difficult. So movement around the city has been restricted. We were limited. You couldn't have more than 2 people in your house at any time. A lot of people won't let you into their building. And the way that the pandemic has affected developing nations is different than it's affected developed nations like Europe and the United States, in that the infrastructure and the finances just don't exist for the hospitals and the medical care to scale up to the needs. And so because they can't scale up to the needs, they've done the opposite, which is strict quarantines in most of South America, except Brazil. And you can see what's happening there. And so what happens is you have to just lock everything down. So that's been going on for months and months. And that psychologically is difficult, because I have spent just weeks at a time alone in this apartment. And, my interaction with other people has been on Zoom or WhatsApp, or, the coffee shop down the street or something. But I have been learning a little bit more, practicing my Spanish. Mi español es mejor. So that's been a blessing. But I hope the borders open sometime soon so I can get moving, get zipping along. Originally, I'd planned to come down from the United States and stay in Colombia. So I was going to stay in Medellin. It's one of my favorite places. My trip around the world I'd finished. And I have about 4 years of content, video, that I haven't been able to edit and publish, because I make a significant portion of my living by making videos for Adorama TV and other photography sponsors. And so I have to, when I make a video, I have to choose the one I'm contracted to make or the one I can make for free. And it always has to be the one that pays the bills. Yeah. And also, I just haven't had the computing power to edit 4K videos, a bunch of things. So my plan was, hey, I'll get to Medellin. I'll get a new computer. I'll just sort of camp out there from Colombia. It's a quick trip up to the United States. I can come up there for a couple of weeks, come back. I was planning, I have a little apartment in Paris that a friend owns, that he said, hey, you could stay there for the summer. So I was going to go to Paris and stay there for the summer and come back. I was just going to write and edit and publish. So I was planning on being in South America all 2020 anyway, with some exceptions of some trips. But some friends said, hey, last time you were in South America and you wanted to go to Patagonia all the way down to Ushuaia, you were here in winter. So it was August. And so you can't. It's just deep snow. I guess you could, but I can't. And so I realized, I'm like, hey, it's November. I could shoot down there and then just take some time, come right back, and then still stay in Medellin and do my trip. So I didn't make it back to Colombia. I got stuck here in Argentina. But the truth is, I was planning on being in South America anyway. So it's not what I'd planned, but it's not horrible. And Buenos Aires is an amazing city. Even shut down, it's an amazing, amazing place. I've got great friends here. So, it's not what I planned, but so far it's not horrible.
Yeah. So you're kind of still in the making of that story. For maybe we'll have to revisit this a year or two from now and see how things turn out. Yeah, that's been one of the cool things. Kind of watching on your social feeds, just you kind of, I don't want to say, making lemonade out of lemons, because it's not all lemons, but just kind of making the most of the situation and being in one place. Because I know, like, that feeling when you're constantly moving and you never get the time to kind of dig back into your video archives, especially if you're constantly accumulating content, and to be able to do that. And it's been kind of cool to see. You have teased a little bit on your YouTube channel of like stuff to come, and
there's some cool stuff. I cannot wait. So the entire thing that happened in Russia and Mongolia and getting stuck in those rivers, those crossing, all that stuff, that is ready to be edited. I have a new computer that's going to be here in 7 days, I think. I can't wait. Awesome. So that's all loaded up, ready to go. So I've been cataloging all that stuff. I'm going to show first, though, the trip through the Carretera Austral, which is Ruta 7. So Route 7 through southern Chile is, I think, one of the most amazing roads in all of the world. I'd put it on my top 3. If you're considering a trip from like the southern part of Chile, where all the rivers and lakes and everything start, go there. It's amazing. It is amazing. And most any rider can do this trip. It's dirt and asphalt. There are some really amazing more difficult roads that you can go down if you choose. But if you're, an intermediate rider and you've got a couple of weeks, you can rent bikes in Santiago, Chile, and ride down. So if if it's something that you're hesitant because of the shipping and getting everything down to South America, there are options for that. So anyway, there's a video coming on that. There's the stuff that happened in Africa that I'll be editing, all the Russia stuff. There's a trip all the way around Australia that's going to be published. So, and then I'm going to recut a bunch of the videos that I did previously because it's a lot of me talking to a camera in my helmet. So we're going to sort of trim those down so they're not like 30 minutes of me filming the road. Yeah. Turns out nobody likes to watch just the road coming at you. So who knew?
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, thanks, Mark. Thank you for taking the time out today. And yeah, I'm excited to see those videos. We're obviously we mentioned your Mark on a Bike website. Does that kind of get everybody, if they want to kind of keep up with your videos and journeys and stuff?
That's the place to go. I mean, honestly, the daily day-to-day stuff, because it's so difficult to upload when there's poor Wi-Fi, I've learned that just throwing stuff up to Instagram is much, much easier than updating the blog all the time. So I've actually integrated Instagram to markonabike.com. So if you go to Mark on a Bike, you can find the Instagram feed, you can find all my YouTube videos. And if you just forget where to go, just go to markwallace.com. If you're a photography junkie, you can go there. You can see all the photography content. I think I've made close to 1,000 photography tutorials on YouTube. Wow. And Creative Live and through Profoto and Seikonic and Pocket Wizard and X-Rite and I don't know, fill in the blank. Just Google Mark Wallace photography and you'll get more than you care to see, actually. Or Mark Wallace motorcycle and you'll get my alter ego.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thanks again, Mark. And yeah, hopefully our paths will cross and we'll see you down the road.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really a privilege.
So as I mentioned on there, we'll put links to that Muddy Tanzania video and some other Mark stuff on our show notes for the podcast. So if you just Google ADVMoto Podcast, it'll take you right to our page and you'll be able to find the show notes for episode 3 on there. Next up, Jocelin Snow. And before you meet her, just take a second to put yourself in her shoes. What if you had an injury that was, say, a career-ending injury? If riding motorcycles was your career, what would you do if a doctor told you would never ride again? Or someone told you were too small or that you weren't able to do something? Well, I'm excited for you to meet Jocelin. So I'm here with can I say world famous Jocelin Snow?
I don't know. Infamous, maybe.
World infamous Jocelin Snow. Welcome to the podcast, Jocelin.
Thank you so much. It's such a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
No, it's wonderful to have you, and I'm excited. So Jocelin and I have just been chatting a little bit via email and here just before we started recording, and she has some amazing stories, and you guys are in for a treat. But first off, one of the things I like to ask people is, how did you get into riding motorcycles? Because everybody has a different kind of origin story, so to speak. And what was yours?
Sure. Well, it's kind of interesting, but nobody in my family or my grandparents, nobody rode motorcycles. Nobody in my neighborhood. I don't even think anybody in my town, maybe not even. Yeah, no, nobody in my neighborhood rode motorcycles. What happened was I came across a magazine that had a Kawasaki dirt bike on the front cover. I don't know. Don't ask me where I found this magazine, but I thought it was pretty cool. And so I started asking my parents if I could have a motorcycle. Now, my mother was the administrator at the hospital, and my father was the principal of my school, and they were like, no, absolutely not. Are you getting a motorcycle? And I would leave the magazine all over the house and, post pictures up, and they were like, nope. So I was a stubborn little brat, and I had a paper route, and I started paying this kid at school $10 a week for a KDX 80 dirt bike. And I don't know, I feel like it took me a year. Now I am 12 years old by the time I finished paying this bike off. And I needed to learn how to ride it. So I took the school bus to his house and he kind of gave me like a little lesson. And then that weekend, his parents dropped it off at the end of the driveway on a milk crate and took off. That's how I got started riding bikes. And nobody told me that you had to mix oil and gas together, or you had to lube your chain, or check your tire pressure, or clean your air filter. So I made like every mistake possible with motorcycles, it seems like. I learned the hard way, you know. But yeah, I was able to keep it. They used it as a nice form of, you know, keep me disciplined, I guess. You couldn't ride the bike if I didn't behave myself or, you know, do my chores. So
yeah,
that's where it all started.
I can only imagine if your mom was an administrator at a hospital, she was probably super conscious and maybe super worried, you know, probably seeing the cases that would come in, you know, from motorcycle accidents, you know, that it was probably like, no way.
Yeah, it's true. And she would tell me, she would say, you know, today we had a guy came in that crashed on the bike and we had a wire brush and we were scrubbing gravel out of the cuts on his skin. Is that what you want? You know, and, I don't know. For some reason, it didn't deter me any, and that's how we got going.
Yeah. So let's talk about the story that I'm really excited to hear is about you racing in the international GS, the BMW International GS Trophy. But take us before you tell that story, how did you get from your, you know, dirt bike at 12 years old to, you know, being a competitive rider, you know, riding internationally in the GS Trophy race?
Sure. Yeah, it's quite a story. So I had that little dirt bike and, you know, there was no place to ride in town. So I would push it about a mile and a half. I think it was uphill both ways. At least that's how it felt, you know, to this little sand quarry and try to learn how to ride this bike. Eventually, I figured it out. And then my next motorcycle was a Ninja 250 for a very short time, just a few months. And then immediately I went in and purchased a Ninja 750. So that was really like my first real bike, the ZX7. From there, I did a bunch of drag racing and stuff down at the airport. We used to have drag races on the weekend. And then eventually I decided I wanted to do some road racing. I had no idea really kind of how to get into it. A friend of mine said, well, you can take this course and you can get your racing license. So I started doing amateur road racing and eventually got, I think it was about a year from a year to the day when I got my amateur racing license, I got my pro AMA racing license. And so I was racing TZ 250s, AMA, doing, you know, and having fun with that. I had dirt bikes. I was doing some motocross, a lot of flat track. When Supermoto came out, I did some Supermoto racing, hare scrambles, and then different enduro races. Pretty much, I think I did just about every aspect of motorcycling, every type of style of motorcycling except trials riding. I didn't get a chance to get into any of that really. And so that's where it's progressing. And then I was racing in Daytona, and the weather had made a drastic change. And those bikes they're pretty finicky when it comes to jetting, the air density and the temperature and the humidity. And I had the wrong nozzle jet in that bike. And coming down the front straightaway, the motor seized as I was heading into turn one, which caused an awful mess. I ended up colliding with another rider. We were both okay, but I ended up breaking a vertebrae in my neck and my back, 6 ribs, right ankle. I forget. It was a list anyway. It was funny is my race vehicle, everybody has like their race vehicle that they tow around their race bike and all their tools with. Well, my race truck was an ambulance, a used ambulance. So this was in Daytona, Florida, right? So by the time I got out of the hospital, I got to ride in my own ambulance all the way back to Maine, where I was from. So that was interesting. But the recovery from that was pretty brutal. I was in a wheelchair and I had no movement of my left arm. I could wiggle my fingers and my hands, but I couldn't lift my arm up on its own. And the doctor I went to was like, you have some serious nerve damage. It's not going to be fixable, and the chances of you ever riding a motorcycle again are 0. So that's not going to happen. And that was pretty tough to hear, because I had made motorcycles such a big part of my life. Like that was all I knew. That was like my joy. That was my escape. That was my fun. That was my adrenaline. Everything revolved around motorcycles in some shape or form, one way or another. And that was difficult. At the time, I had my own business. It was a sign company. It was and I don't know if you can imagine, like trying to put graphics. I remember trying to put graphics on this guy's speedboat in a wheelchair with one arm. Not so good. So I was, again, remember now I'm that stubborn girl still, just a little older, and I decided that I wasn't going to accept that decision to never ride a motorcycle again. So I told all my friends that I was going to try everything there was to try, and they started handing it off to me. I did the Nike magnets. I did the Reiki, hypnotism. I mean, I did these special diets with like just vegetables. You name it, I tried it. And I ended up getting movement back, and it was bizarre because it was almost overnight. Like within a couple of days, I started to have movement back in the shoulder again, and it got better and better and better. And eventually I was able to put my arm up over my head. And as soon as I was able to do that, I got on a motorcycle and I rode right by that doctor's office. And I made sure I gave him like a really friendly wave and told him that he was number one. And it felt so
And did a burnout
good.
in front of his front door, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. It felt so good. And so here we go, getting back into riding. But I didn't think I wanted to get back into road racing. It maybe it scared me a little bit. The risk, involved some high speeds, and not only that, I want to say maybe more than that, it was financial. I mean, even with sponsors at the time, I think there was only 1 or 2 of us women road racing, on the pro level. It one or maybe just me and a couple others possibly, but I hope you can pause your video at this point, because now I have to stop and think about what I want to say.
That's okay.
Somebody just walked by the window and made a big old face, so it totally distracted me off this
That's
thing.
all
right. Where were we?
So you were recovering. You had the miracle on Center Street, and
yeah. I just want to make sure you're listening. That's your test. Yeah. So I decided that I didn't really want to get back into the road racing, because it was just really expensive too, So I didn't want to get injured. I didn't want to spend that kind of money. So I started doing dirt bikes again. So dirt bikes and hair scrambles and that type of thing. But I was looking for a bigger challenge. I was out there riding with the 12-tooth countershaft sprocket, and carrying the chainsaw in the back, looking for the most difficult trails and finding like the worst adventures I could dig up. And I just wanted something more. So I went to an IMS show, and they had a booth there with a BMW GS 1200. And it was beautiful. I remember it was black with all gold accessories. It's black and gold, black and yellow graphics. It was beautiful. And I had the boxes on it, all the extras, and I was like, that's it. I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that thing, and I'm going to take off. I'm going to go to, you're supposed to go to Alaska when you buy those things, right? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Alaska. And I went over to the booth, and I jumped on that bike, and I don't know, I'm 5'1.5" with a 27-inch, if I stretch it, 27-inch inseam. And I sat on that bike with my feet dangling about 10 inches from the ground on either side, and I could not get it off the kickstand. And I remember the guy in the booth, he was just like, yeah, this may be a little bit too big for you. So I got off the bike and I walked away, kind of felt defeated. Again, somebody telling me I can't do something, right? Oh. So it didn't sit well with me, but you know, I guess I thought that was the thing, that you have to have 2 feet on the ground to ride a motorcycle, right? You have to be able to touch the ground. That's what they said, 2 toes down on the ground. So I believed it. And then I think we are 2 years later, and I'm scrolling on my phone through social media before I go to bed, like we all do.
Yeah.
And this video came up of this like 10-year-old boy, 10, 11, 12-year-old boy with one arm who was golfing at a pro level. And it was impressive. And, you know, after you watch one video, it skips right on to like the next video that's similar. And it was a woman with one arm who was playing in a symphony, playing the violin. So after I shut my phone off, I kind of laid there and I thought, well, what's my excuse? I want to buy a big adventure bike and go find these huge adventures. And so I'm short, I can't touch the ground. These guys have one arm and they're at beyond expert level. Like, what's my handicap? You know, what's my excuse? And the next morning I woke up on fire, and I went to the dealership, walked onto the showroom floor, and walked over to a GSA 1200 and said, I want to buy that. I hadn't ridden it, and I had only sat on it 2 years prior. Like, I didn't even sit on it. I want to buy that right there. Well, that's another story, but that dealership, they wouldn't sell it to me because I thought it was too big of a bike for me, and I actually couldn't get them to sell me the bike. I had to go to another place. But wow, that's another fun story. That's a really good story. So I buy this bike, and I get this bike home, and I put it in the garage, close the door, go to bed. And the next morning I get up, it's Saturday, I'm going to go for a ride, and I rip open that garage door and I look at this thing. And I mean, the GSA, this guy behind me here, they're wide, they're so big. And I pop open that garage door and I took like 10 steps back, and I was going, oh my gosh, what did I do? It's huge. And right away I had to start figuring out how to ride it and how to get it up off the kickstand. So I went down to Rawhide Adventures down in Castaic, California, and I took a class, the next step class. And from there, I left and I went to Alaska. That's what you're supposed to do, right? I did 30 days, 12,000 miles, and it was unbelievable. Just absolutely kind of had the adventure of a lifetime, I'll tell you what. And at the time, I wasn't in the best place. Like, I had just gone through a divorce, and I had a lot of people disappointing me in my life. I was a little bit down on humanity, you know, like just not feeling quite right. Yeah. When I took off on this trip, I met some of the most extraordinary people, and I was faced with just amazing experiences with people taking me into their homes, or generosity and honesty, and it was an amazing trip. That's another story, but the Alaska trip. And I came back from Alaska feeling like I could ride this bike okay, and I also had restored my faith in humanity. Life was good, and my shoulder was completely healed, and I'm ready for my next adventure. So I started telling my friends, well, I'm into adventure bikes now. Let me tell you how cool they are. Let me tell you where I went and what I did and who I saw and the adventures that I had. And one of my buddies said, well, since now you're an adventure rider, you should try out for this GS trophy. And I had never even heard of it. I didn't know what it was. So he proceeded to tell me it happens every other year. There's a GS trophy, and it's kind of like the Olympics of motorcycles. So each participating country has a team of 3. And then they all go together at some middle of nowhere and compete. And I thought, wow, that sounds amazing. But I didn't know if my skills were ready. So I was a bit hesitant about trying out. So the first year is a qualifier, and then the following year is the GS trophy, wherever it may be. And then the following year again after that is a new qualifier. Now you can only do this once in your life. You can never do it more than once. So I didn't know if I really wanted to try out. But then he proceeds to tell me that year, so that qualifier was 2017, that year was the first year that women were going to be allowed to compete head-to-head just like the men, on the same track as the men, on the same bike as the men. So he sparked my interest, and then I asked for, tell me more, and he said, well, the previous trophy was the first year they ever allowed women. Women weren't even allowed to do the GS trophy prior to that. Mm. It's interesting, right? Yeah. And that first year, they didn't have to compete head-to-head for the qualifier. Instead, they made a video of themselves, and the videos were put online, and they were judged. So I thought about everything he said, and I thought, well, if this is the first year really that women are going to be allowed and we're going to compete equally and fairly, then I need to do this, if nothing else, because it's the right thing to do. I need to support all these women that to be able to do this. Because what if they allow women and then nobody goes and qualifies, right?
Right.
So I did. But before I did, I built my own course just from looking at videos on YouTube or pictures on the internet to try to get an idea of what this GS trophy thing was all about. And it's mostly slower riding on very technical terrain, going over logs and rocks, or using a bit of your brain, but it's definitely a team thing. So a lot of the exercises you do with your team. So I built this course out in some field, and I practiced every single night after work. From the moment I got back from Alaska, when I signed up for the trophy, to the moment that we had the qualifier was about 2 months. And I rode every night, and on the weekends, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. I ate my lunch and my dinner out there on the field, and rode. And let me tell you what, I laid that bike down 1,000 times. I tipped that bike over. It was upside down more than it was right side up, I think, until I started to get the hang of it, and that's when I developed kind of my way to ride the bikes and such. And then off to they actually had it at Castaic, California. They had the qualifier, and I was fortunate, lucky probably, to win. And I thought, excellent. And the trophy was going to be in Mongolia for 2018. So I was so excited. I was going to go to Mongolia, but no, it doesn't work that way. The top 3 men become the men's team. So we had our USA men's team. And the top 2 women, BMW sent us to South Africa to compete with all the other women from all the other participating countries. So we had 23 really good riders, these women, and we all had to compete against each other to make a team of 3 women for the international women's team. Then that international women's team went to Mongolia to compete with the men. So that was the plan. So I had to go, and so after this qualifier was in October. In November, I think the end of October or early November, they sent us right down to South Africa to compete again. It was cool. I mean, at first it was like, oh, it's all expenses paid, and we get this beautiful brand new rally, and we're gonna go ride for 4 days. I mean, even if you lose, this isn't so bad, right? So I thought. So we get there, and we're on this big bus, like a big old tour bus, and we're on this bus for 2.5, 3 hours until we end up at country tracks in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And the bus pulls up, and I mean, you can see this, looks like a golf course, this beautiful green grass with 23 rallies lined up like someone snapped a chalk line and lined those front tires all up. I mean, just beautiful. And sun there setting, and they had the big bow flags of GS Trophy all flapping in the wind. I mean, it was great. We get off this bus, I'm dragging my gear bag and my stuff, and kind of they bring us over to the edge of this flat grass field, and they line us all up, and I'm like, this is cool. And then they come down the line and they throw a sleeping bag at us and a tent at us and a pad. And now I'm holding this and my bag and my helmet. And they get everybody done and they stand in the field and they said, okay, listen up. This is your first special test. The competition has begun. Pick a spot in the field, set your tent up. Make your tent, and they had an example. Make your tent look like this one, which was completely set up. Put all your gear inside the tent, gear up in your full riding gear. Run across the field, jump the trench, go to the table, check in, run over to the bikes, pick the bike that you want, memorize the last 6 of the VIN, the number plate, and the mileage on the bike. Run over to the barn, put that information in, and go. I was like, oh no. So, but remember now, I did a little research, right? So I did see all of these tents from the women that competed the 2 years prior in their qualifier in South Africa. They after they did their video and they got picked from their state, they still had to go down to South Africa and compete again to get on the team. So I saw all these tents and I thought, wouldn't that be weird or interesting if they happen to have like a tent race? So I went to Dick's Sporting Goods and I found the actual tent and I cleared out a space on the showroom floor and I laid this tent out and I put it up and I took it down and I put it up and I took it down and I put it up and took it down until the sales guy comes over and he was like, so are you gonna buy that tent? And I was just like, no, probably not. But it paid off because I had that tent up, gear on, run across, and I was the first one over to the bikes, which was a cool way to start. And that was a great way to start off, the 4-day competition.
Yeah.
From there, we went straight into a blindfold ride. After that competition, however we finished, they split us up into groups. 2, 3 groups, I think, 4 groups. And then they took us down to the bottom of this hill. And they had like a little white dot at the top of the hill that looked like a paper plate. And we're at the bottom of the hill. And since I won that 10 race, I had to go first. So they put me on the bike. And then they take this sweatshirt, this big black sweatshirt, and they put it over my head and tie it in a knot. So you can see nothing. So I have nothing to see. And then they say, okay, when I say go, you start your bike and you ride up to the little white dot on top of the hill and stop the bike and get as close as you can to it. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever tried blindfold riding. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it unless you got a buddy around. But as soon as you stand up on the bike, we really do look where you want to go, right? You go where you look. It's a big deal. Our vision really helps us ride these motorcycles. So as soon as you take that away, even though the handlebars are kind of pointing straight, you cannot tell if that's straight or if you're to the right or to the left. And you get completely spun around. So, some ladies were riding to the right and the left, and you tip over because you don't have the balance, because you don't have the things to focus on. What I did though is I listened to those flapping bow flags in the wind, because that's where the chalk line, the little chalk dot was. And I just kind of rode towards the noise of the flags and stopped. And I landed 4 feet from that little white paper plate dot. And I know it's like pretty good. So I mean, it wasn't the best finish, but it was pretty good. And
That's some
the
Luke
events,
Skywalker stuff right there.
What's that?
That's some Luke Skywalker stuff right there.
It is the Force, you know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that was pretty interesting. And that's the beginning of the GS Trophy. From there, I made the team. BMW decided to have 2 teams. For the first time, they had 2 women's teams, which was another big deal. And the other lady, Bettina from the U.S., made the team, which was cool. We had 2 U.S. people on the team. And then Julia from Australia was on our team. So we had a great team. We went to Mongolia, and we had the time of our life. It was absolutely amazing to be, maybe it's a little bit about seeing a country you've never seen before. And maybe it's a little bit about riding that terrain you've never ridden before. And probably it was a little bit about the competition itself too, which is cool to compete. But what it was really all about to me is the people. And first of all, not just the locals who loved us and cheered us on, and the kids that would come running out of the school and want to see and touch our bikes, but also the other competitors. Because here you are in this, way off, we were in the Gobi Desert. I mean, in the middle of nowhere, with all these other people from different countries who share the same passion as you do, and we're all doing what we love and getting to learn, each other's cultures and how their countries are and how they ride and just enjoy that and share that together. The camaraderie was just amazing. It was unbelievable. And that was my once in a lifetime experience. And I wanted to go back. After that trophy, I wanted to go back to the next trophy so bad. But you can only do it once, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But BMW called me that next year during the qualifiers and asked if I would be interested to go back to the next trophy, which was then held in New Zealand, which we just had in February of 2020, as a co-host. And you still get a bike, and you still get all your gear, and they still get everything covered, and you just can go and you be a host instead of a competitor. So that was quite a gift. Well, I mean, wow, what an honor. It was awesome to be able to go, and now not from a competitor point of view, and have the competition and the stress of the competition itself, but to be able to go and watch everybody else go through what I had gone through 2 years prior, and cheer them on and offer support for them and stuff. It was really, really neat. So anyone who hasn't done the GS Trophy and just watches it a lot, boy, I encourage you to check out whatever country you're from, to check out when your next qualifier is, and just sign up. I mean, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the cool thing that really sticks out to me is you wouldn't have had any of those. You wouldn't have had the Alaska trip. You wouldn't have had your GS Trophy stuff if, when this episode's about Sidetracked, so I'm kind of bringing it back to that. When you got sidetracked, that accident, right? That accident I think that you had at Daytona would put a lot of people out of commission, right? I mean, they would just look at that as like, well, I had my chance, that's, that was the sign to me to end my career or whatever. And for you, it's like, no, it's a bump in the road, literally. It's one bump in the road. And had you not persevered and tried to keep putting graphics on with one hand in a wheelchair on speedboats, and keep persevering, you never would have had that Alaska trip that restored your faith in humanity, and you never would have had those GS trophies that just sound like incredible experiences. I mean, like New Zealand and Mongolia are both on my bucket list, places to ride, because every time I see someone's ride reports or, photos from there or whatever, it's just like, oh man. I mean, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, and so there's obviously beautiful riding around here, But yeah, I think like Mongolia and New Zealand are on a different scale, different level, you know.
Yeah, they are. They're amazing places to ride, and the people are equally as amazing that live there. But you know, you're right, and I would hope that this might be somewhat inspirational to some people, and they would just don't, you know, if I could give a message out there, I would just say, don't let anybody crush your dreams. You know, don't let anybody take anything away from you. This is your life, and to, you know, either we have our dreams or we live them, right? And so to live them, and don't give up. You know, think life is hard, sure, but we're pretty capable. And when we set our minds to stuff and we just don't take no for an answer, it is absolutely just astonishing what we can do, you know? And that, thank goodness I did that. Thank goodness I didn't just listen to the doctor and be like, well, I guess I'm never going to ride a motorcycle again, because it changed my life. And not just Mongolia and New Zealand, like you mentioned. After I made the trophy team, tour companies contacted me and asked if I would be willing to lead a tour. So for instance, the first one was South Africa, coincidentally. A tour company called me and said, here's the deal. Come down, lead this tour. We'll give you a bike. Here's the GPS. I mean, all expenses paid. What a deal. And you can get a cut of the profit if you want. That's fine too. And then I came back from that and I went to Colombia to do a tour in Colombia twice. So all of a sudden, you know, just because I got this bike, and then it was Alaska, and then it was, you know, Mongolia, New Zealand, Colombia, South Africa, and then it just has gone bigger and better and more awesome from there, you know. And I'm very fortunate. I really am. And then, but out of all the things I've done and all the cool places I've been, the memories that really stick with me are the people I've met along the way, for sure, because they inspire me, you know, and encourage me to dream big and keep going and, you know, chase my dreams. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jocelin. I appreciate your time, you know, coming on the show and sharing some of your stories. And we're definitely going to have you back on the podcast, because I feel like there's so many more things we need to hear about. I mean, that Alaska trip alone, I can only imagine some of the stuff that happened on there. So yeah, we'll definitely be having you back.
Yeah, that's just the base story. From there, there's all the good stories. So we've got a lot more stories we gotta tell. So it's been such a pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for having me along. And I hope we get to do this some more. And thanks to everybody that watches and supports ADVMoto. And I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jocelin. So if you want to see some more of Jocelin's riding, some of the stuff she talked about, some really cool pictures from the International GS Trophy, if you go to her Instagram, so it's just Jocelin Snow, Jocelin Snow, on Instagram, you can see a lot of that stuff. And again, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes for the podcast. If you just Google ADVMoto Podcast, you can find the show notes there. So up next is reviews from the current issue with Alex Marsh. So I'm here with web editor Alex Marsh from the ADVMoto Mag, and he is one of the contributors to the product reviews this month, specifically on the Uclear digital and the SRC Moto's Tiger 800 bolt-ons. And yeah, thanks for being on the podcast, Alex.
Cool, happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So talk a little bit about continuing our conversation from last week with David. Just give a brief overview of what the Uclear is and kind of like where it stands in, I guess, kind of all the comms that are available on the market.
Yeah, it's definitely like a top level, flagship level communication unit. It's up there competing with the Sena 50K, 30K, and the Cardo Pactox. It's got all the features that you'd expect out of that. I think it was the first one to the market with Bluetooth 5.0, so it handles connecting to multiple devices really well. and it's got mesh pairing. So it's super easy to pair with other Uclear units. But just like any other comm unit, you can pair it to other brands, but it's not what they're made to do. So it's not always ideal. But it's simplified. It's just buttons. It doesn't have any jog wheels or anything. And for the most part, they've made it really easy to use.
Nice. Yeah, I like the fact that you can use it with your gloves on. It has like the little laser or the something that detects where you can just like kind of wave your hand or just touch your hand to that. That's pretty unique. I there's, considering the unit I have, which is a different brand and slightly older, that would have been nice in a few situations.
Yeah, sometimes the buttons are hard to find with gloves on. I have the unit here. The sensor for the laser is this part on the bottom right here. But then it also has some other sensors that other units don't have. It's got a accelerometer for sensing motion. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that it can do is if you forget to turn it off when you put your helmet down, it will turn itself off when it doesn't sense motion. And then when you pick the helmet back up, it'll sense that motion and pair back with your phone. And then there's also the crash detection feature that it can use that same accelerometer to figure out if you had an accident.
Yeah. David talked a little bit about that last week, and that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I didn't realize that it turns itself off. That's pretty nice because I don't know how many times I've burned through a battery when I stop for gas and a like a bite to eat or candy bar or something, and come back and like 2 minutes down the road,
blue light's still blinking when you come back 45 minutes later. Yeah.
Yeah, kicking yourself. But yeah, that's pretty good. Did you what was it? What were the speakers like? Because I know some of them, like when I've used the speakers that come with the units themselves in the past, that they just like, there's so much road noise, especially if you have a noisy helmet with a lot of wind noise. Some of the race helmets are a little bit noisier. What's the speakers like as far as what it comes with it?
So sound quality, the speakers are pretty good. They're pretty big drivers.
Okay.
And generally, if you know speakers, you know that a little bit bigger magnet is probably going to give you a little bit fuller sound. So they do offer a good full range sound, and they get really loud. A lot of older comm units that I've used, you are hard pressed to use them above 60 miles an hour sometimes, especially if you wear earplugs. You're just not going to hear them on the freeway. But these definitely get loud enough to hear even spoken word things like podcasts at higher speeds. And the noise cancellation in the mics is out of this world. It uses a dual mic array, and it just cancels out does a really good job of canceling out sound, and keeps things clean.
Nice. Was there any I know you always do like a kind of pros and cons list in the article. Were there any things that you wish could be better with the unit or improved after using it?
Yeah, there's 3 things that I think they could improve on. The first one is just the nature of that dual mic array. It's a double-edged sword. It's really good at noise suppression when it works, but it's hard to set up. It's going to take some trial and error. You're going to be pulling the top liner out of your helmet to move those around a little bit and find the perfect spot for them on your first couple of rides. And then just the other thing is the way that they have the mics and the speaker set up, there's no option right now to charge and use at the same time, or to use your own earbuds. A lot of people have custom made in-ear monitors, or a particular set of headphones that they like to use on the bike. That's not an option right now, and that is a deal breaker for some people. My friend that I was testing it with, that's how he usually uses his comm units, and so it was a change for him to have to use the speakers. And then the last thing is technology related. Uclear's got this really good app with a ton of features, and you use the app to change all the settings on the device, and the app uses your cell phone signal and location for the safety features and stuff like that. But the unit is really reliant on it. If you don't have the app on your phone, it won't do the U-Safe crash detection or and some of the other features. And then the app is pretty reliant on cell signal. So even parts of the app like changing noise suppression and stuff like that, if you don't have good enough cell signal to have something, the app just won't open. So that's software. That's easy enough for them to fix for that app to make certain parts of it less reliant on cell signal. But the other two parts are hardware things that people should know about.
Yeah. Is it, are you able to pair it like via Bluetooth? Like, let's say you were up in the mountains, the backcountry or something like that. Are you able to Bluetooth it to like one of the GPS like satellite trackers that would be able to send out like a accident message through that?
No.
Okay.
That's a really cool idea if they could somehow connect it to a spot or an inReach, if that's what you're talking about. To send that without having to hit the button on that.
Yeah.
But they would probably have to work pretty closely with Spot or Garmin to make that work.
Yeah.
It does, however, pair really well with multiple devices. So if you have your cell phone and a Garmin nav unit on your bike, you can pair it both, so you can get nav directions and listen to music from your cell phone, stuff like that.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So potentially, if you were just listening to music off your cell phone in airplane mode, and then had your nav unit, you'd be good to go on that then, without needing a cell phone signal. It sounds like. Correct.
Yeah, you can still connect to your phone and do things offline on your phone. It's just there are certain features that you're not going to get if you don't have cell signal.
Cell signal, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, good stuff. So let's talk about the Tiger. So is SRC Moto's Tiger 800 upgrades or bolt-ons? Did I get all that right?
Yep.
Okay.
So kind of the way I thought about this was, it's an easy afternoon kind of dress up for your bike with some functionality. SRC Moto makes, pretty nice parts for a wide variety of bikes. The Tiger is one of them, and it's what I have in my garage. So they sent the parts for that. They sent me a headlight guard, a side stand foot, a luggage rack, and a rear brake reservoir cover or guard. The side stand foot and the luggage rack are everyday function items. They're super useful for strapping things to the back of the bike and stopping your bike from falling over on soft surfaces. The headlight guard and then the brake reservoir guard are things that are good to have. Headlights are expensive to replace, and then if a stick does poke through your plastic brake reservoir, stuff like that can happen, especially if you fall over out on the trail. This just provides a little bit extra protection. Doesn't cost all that much to add, especially for that brake reservoir guard. I think that's less than $40, and makes your bike look a little bit cooler and gives it a little bit more protection.
Nice. Yeah. We were chatting, Alex and I were chatting a little bit offline before we started recording here. And he actually has an Instagram account. And if you want to see, obviously there's pictures in the current issue, the September-October issue of ADVMoto Mag. But if you want to see some pictures of the stuff in action, if you go to Alex's Instagram, you said it's Maryland Moto, at Maryland Moto on Instagram?
Yep, at Maryland Moto on Instagram. And Maryland is spelled out. It's like the state, Maryland. Yep. And I'm fairly active on there. You can check out stuff that's in my feed, and then I'm always giving scoops on what I'm reviewing in the stories.
Cool. That's pretty good. That's cool. Yeah, to be able to get a little bit of a sneak preview of if people are a little bit eagle-eyed, they can catch what's coming up in future issue reviews. So
That's right. And if they have questions, send me a message. I'm always happy to answer questions about gear, stuff like that.
Great. Sounds good. Well, thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. And sounds like your cat might be hungry back there.
Yeah, I've got the door shut to the office, and so she's pretty upset about that. Hopefully the interview hasn't picked up all that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. She got to be a star in the podcast. So awesome. Well, thanks again, Alex. And yeah, see you down the road.
See you later. Bye.
So that wraps up episode 3 for the ADVMoto podcast. If you want to check out the current issues of September-October issue, the print versions anywhere that magazines are sold, or if you go to adventuremotorcycle.com, you can subscribe to the print or digital or both and get those delivered straight to you, which is awesome. And it has a lot of stuff that we talked about, like the reviews from Alex, the KTM 390 Adventure write-up we talked about in episode 1, as well as one of the things, I was just flipping through it today here, and one of the things that caught my eye, they have a section in this issue about if you're in a country where you don't speak the language, what are the do's and don'ts of interacting? You know, it's kind of a crash course on how to be a good human when you're traveling and you don't speak the language, so pretty cool. But yeah, and if you want to connect with us, just go, you can email us at podcast@adventuremotorcycle.com, and we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear feedback on the show, things that you would like to hear, if it's more gear reviews or more stories or, I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. So you can email us at podcast@adventuremotorcycle.com. And yeah, that wraps it up for this week. And until next time, thank you for enduring my helmet beard for those of you watching on YouTube. And until next time, I'll see you down the road.